Hello everyone, thank you so much for being here today. I'm Bobby Hendry, and to steal Peter's term, I am a member of the foster care alumni graduating class of 2013. My care experience was unfortunately a rather typical one for the times, with the only thing that was consistent in my life being inconsistency. I was constantly moved around, and I felt that I was having to adapt and learn things that were well above my years more often than not. I found family time to be one of the most challenging aspects of my care experience, and I'll go into that a bit more as I take you through the book. So, when I was invited to join the Fostering Lifelong Connections study as an expert by experience, I was really excited. One, the word expert is going to look great on a resume, but two, I'm really passionate about using my story and ability to articulate my lived experience to incite change and progress. I believe studies like this one that involve real stories, real people with real experiences are crucial to bringing about change, and the sharing of stories can offer so much insight into things that can be improved. And I've gained so much understanding from listening to the other experts in this study, and I'm sure you all will too. It's so exciting to be part of a group with a passion to better care experience for kids who grew up like me, and it warms my heart to see so many people here today with that same drive. So, about the book. The main goal for this book was to empower kids with knowledge about their feelings, about how to communicate, about their rights, etc. To basically put all the things we'd talked about in the group Zoom meetings into something practical that kids and you could hold. I'd like to say that it took a lot of hard work, but if I'm honest, it really didn't. I mean, it took a bit, but as soon as I sat down in front of my computer, it felt like all the words and things I wish I knew as a scared and overwhelmed little kid just fell out of my brain and neatly into chapters. So speaking of chapters, I'm going to show you what we've whipped up. And feel free to follow along if you've got your copies, or sneak quietly to grab one. So I've called it My Family Time is Mine. The main goal of this book is to give kids agency over their family time. Their family time is theirs. Cool. All right. So on the right, you'll see a bit about me, my experience, and why I've created this 72-page tips and tricks guide. As we've just heard Billy speak, you can feel how important it is to hear that this is a real experience. And I remember as a kid, anytime I met anyone, specifically adults, that had a care experience, I instantly trusted them more. I knew they got it. I wanted kids that read this book to know that this is coming from someone with real experience that understands a lot about family time. So contents, some spoilers there. Chapter 1, you have the right to enjoy time with your family. Knowing your rights is the most important first step in having agency. So it made sense to start off with this. So this chapter just goes over the rights of the kid, specifically when it comes to family time. So rights when it comes to safety, boundaries, having a say in how family time goes, etc. But most importantly, it encourages speaking out about anything negative or unsafe that happens at family time to caseworkers and other trusted adults. And every chapter has a couple of pages that look like this. First page, a bunch of quotes from kids about the topic of the chapter, and second, a bunch of self-reflection questions based on the chapter. It's okay to not feel okay before or after family time. I'm going to mainly focus on these next two chapters because I think they're the juiciest too, and because I only have 13 minutes. In front of you all today, I will tell you that I was an absolute menace when it came to family time. And I look back now as an adult, understanding that, well, like, yeah, of course I was going through a lot, but also wishing I could go back and apologise face-to-face to every single carer and caseworker I had. I had so much pent-up anxiety, disappointment, excitement, and it just oozed out of me in a lot of ways, very loud ways. Hey, even as an adult, a lot of those feelings still linger when I visit members of my birth family. So in this chapter, I wanted to reassure kids that confusing feelings are okay and can be understood a little bit better. So you'll see on the right page what I'm calling a step-by-step guide to regulation. I know as a kid, it was pretty obvious when an adult tried to use regulation techniques, i.e. the 3 R's from Instant Family, great movie, would recommend. But just like in that movie, kids can tell when an adult is trying to calm them down using a technique they read off a whiteboard in training on some random Saturday. So that can make any attempts less effective. So I wanted to include this regulation technique so kids could do it themselves. I believe strongly that kids can be capable of a lot more than we give them credit for if only we gave them the tools. It's hard to communicate your feelings when you don't know the right word to communicate them, and we can't expect kids to know the right words. These pages go over a bunch of words that can be used for happy, worried, surprised, sad, and angry feelings to help them communicate their feelings. So in turn, carers, caseworkers, etc., they can help them better support and understand them. And similarly to the step-by-step guide to regulation, I've done another step-by-step guide about understanding feelings. The goal with this is that kids can learn how to understand their feelings and the intensity, as well as how to move forward from them. This will help them communicate the situation as well. And on the right, I've talked about temper tantrums. See, as a kid, whenever I felt big feelings around family time, I remember just exploding inside. And it wasn't until I was an adult and I listened to a podcast on why toddlers have temper tantrums that it kind of clicked for me. Young kids have temper tantrums purely because they can't communicate their needs in any other way. As a kid, the magnitude of having my needs met was overwhelming. And it was beyond my capacity to communicate. So I'd erupt inside. It was because I missed my mum and I couldn't wait to see her, but every time I saw her, it exhausted me because I had this intense pressure to make sure everything went perfectly, because I knew she loved us and I knew she missed us, but I was going to have to say goodbye and I was going to have to go back to a place without her, and I wanted to live with her so bad, but I knew why I couldn't, and I felt all these things. I was 7, 8, 9, feeling these things. I couldn't have been expected to understand or communicate them. So, just like a little kid in the lolly aisle whose parent just put the bag of Skittles back that they desperately wanted, I would erupt. Here, I want to explain that to kids that might be in the same situation, understanding that what you're feeling is perfectly normal, but that maybe we can understand it a little bit better. Sorry, one sec, I've just tapped a button on my phone. There we go, all good. Here we go, so more about anger. I feel like anger is a very common feeling. As I've just kind of gone over, I've explained that it's an understandable feeling, it's a big feeling, but I've encouraged kids to talk more to a safe adult about those feelings. And on the next page, I talk about how helpful it can be to come up with a routine before and after family time. Some things might help kids regulate their emotion, like watching movies or allowing them the space to be quiet. So on this page, I encourage kids to talk to their trusted adults, like carers and caseworkers, about what they might need to do before or after family time. Giving kids agency when it comes to communicating the things they need. And again, quotes, quick quiz. Our brains are behind everything we feel. This chapter contains what we spoke about the most in the Expert by Experience Zoom meetings, and that's trauma-informed care, taking into account stress responses, fight, flight, freeze, and the new fella, fawn. First up, explaining how the brain, but specifically the amygdala, works. Again, knowledge about something is the first step in understanding, which is the first step in managing and controlling. I've explained that the amygdala is like an alarm in your brain that's always checking to see if you're safe, and that when the alarm sounds, the stress responses come out. I've also said at the end that when we feel these things, we can be grateful that our body is looking after us in the best way it knows how. I feel like that's an important thing to mention, that kids shouldn't beat themselves up for feeling overwhelming feelings like the stress responses, because I know I struggled to give myself grace when I felt my heart beating out my chest like I needed to punch everyone in the room. I've gone over firstly what the responses are, what they feel like, and what kids can do when they feel them. So that's fight, and there's flight and freeze. All this content has pretty much come straight from the pages of Trauma Expression and Connection Assessment Tool from the Australian Childhood Foundation, as well as what we've talked about a lot and created in our Fostering Lifelong Connections meeting. And there's fawn, with something I'm pretty happy about on the right. On the right, I've included QR codes that direct kids to Spotify playlists that I've made using songs from Australian artists that I feel hit the mark for each stress response. Music was absolutely huge for me as a kid. I would blare Numb by Linkin Park on my Sanyo portable CD player whenever I felt misunderstood or feelings of intense anger, and probably the fight stress response. So, for fight, I found child and teen safe songs with that same energy, ones you could scream along to. For the flight playlist, I've put together more calming and melodic songs with more of a minor key. For freeze, I found songs with a consistent repetitive beat and melody to help them snap out of the freeze. And for fawn, I found songs that could only be described as beautiful and uplifting. If you like Aussie music, I recommend you check them out. You'll probably like them too, and I'm hoping that kids that read this book will. All right, so next up, I want to dive into anxiety, but not the condition, because I'm ill-equipped to talk about that without a psychological degree, but the feeling. I want to normalise the feeling of anxiety, explain that there's a purpose for it, and it's okay to feel anxious. Life is pretty scary. As a kid in care, living often in uncertainty with their life totally uprooted at a moment's notice, these kids know their worries can happen. What's important to know is that despite those worries happening, they can still be okay. You see, I knew I didn't have a lot of control over what happened to me as a kid, but I did learn that I have a lot of control in how I feel about it and how I respond to it. I chose to tell myself not to focus on the what-ifs because I couldn't control them. But if those what-ifs happened, I could get through it. And I think this is a helpful and non-suppressive way to manage anxious thoughts. Yep, another quick quiz. Knowing how to communicate effectively can be a big help. As a kid, I felt I needed communication skills above my years to get by. I had to communicate with numerous carers, caseworkers, even courts and lawyers. A big ask for an 8 and 9-year-old, still a big ask for older kids, and probably adults. In this chapter, I explain how communication doesn't always go smoothly, that there's a responsibility that everyone has when it comes to communicating effectively. You'll see on the right, I've listed some tips to help kids be better listeners, which allows the adults and people they're talking to the chance to get their point across. And here I've listed some tips on how to become a better communicator, on the importance of keeping an open mind, on being respectful, etc. And on the next page, I've included something that I feel is the most important aspect in effective communication, and that's empathy. Being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes when communicating is the best thing you can do to ensure you're both understood. And again, quotes and questions. These questions here are to allow the kids to reflect on things that might be holding them back from being effective communicators. The people and adults around you have thoughts and feelings too. As a kid, you kind of forget that the adults in your life have their own lives and thoughts and feelings and aren't just side characters in yours. I've gone over why adults are important, how they're here to teach us things and make good decisions for us, and overall they are trying their best. On the next page, I've encouraged kids to talk to adults about their feelings and thoughts, as well as things they might need, and to not jump to conclusions about whether adults will or won't understand what they're going through. A crucial thing for not just kids in care, but all kids, is believing that the adults in their life can be depended on for support. So that's a repetitive message in this book. Now, despite trying their best, adults can get it wrong. I had a lot of challenging behaviours as a kid and often agitated negative behaviour out of my carers. I found myself working hard to suppress my feelings and behaviours in a really unhealthy way so to not impact the adults around me and to avoid their negative reactions. I wanted to make sure that I spoke about this, about how children are not responsible for the reactions of others. Sure, they can have an impact, but that despite that, the other people are responsible for their feelings. And on the next page, I've delved into certain actions children might experience from their adults and how to look at those actions better. And then end of chapter. It really is okay to make mistakes. Nobody is perfect. So I've touched on how our thoughts, feelings and behaviours can impact on others, but I also go into how making mistakes are a part of life and that there's the opportunity to grow from them. I'm a big fan of the growth mindset, so this chapter focuses on that a lot. So here I explain that making mistakes are a part of trying new things and growing. And on the right page though, I've gone over how important apologies are when you hurt someone or when your behaviour impacts them. More talk on how it's okay to make mistakes and how the people that care about you won't stop loving you if you don't get it right 100% of the time, and all that matters is continuing to try. And this page is all about how to limit negative self-talk and how kids can be kind to themselves as they learn and grow. And on the next page is about how kids can be a good friend to others and themselves. You can and will get through the hard times. I think this line of thinking was absolutely crucial for me as a kid. Reassuring myself that I was strong and I was going to get through it, even when I didn't feel like it, really helped me manage. So first up, I wanted to go into resilience. You see, resilience is a lot like bravery. It's a sliding scale. You can be absolutely terrified but still do brave things. And in that same way, resilience isn't about being able to stand back up immediately after challenging things happen per se. It's that you do get back up in the end. Kids that experience trauma and life in foster care really have no choice but to be resilient and to bounce back, to adapt, to keep going despite the trauma. And on the next page, we've got some affirmations. Saying things like these to yourself are super helpful as a kid and as an adult. It's a powerful way to stop negative self-talk like we talked about in the last chapter. These pages are to encourage kids that the future is still unwritten and they still have control over who they're going to be. And sure, there might be a lot of things that are out of their control, but there's still a lot of things in it, such as their attitude and their goals. And you know the drill. So for the last few pages, we've got a QR code for the My Family Time Is Mine specific website and a list of who to contact if they need help or someone to talk to. And I don't think it would be a resource for kids in care if it didn't have a page that looked like this. And that's pretty much it. So I've loved the opportunity to use my experience to create this resource that will hopefully better the lives and family times of kids with a current care experience. And I really hope this book helps those kids feel a little less alone and a lot more in control of a childhood that I know can feel all too well lonely and helpless. There are currently talks of turning this resource into something a little bit more under 10 friendly, as well as turning it into a group work resource, so maybe keep an eye out for that. And thank you all for being here, but most importantly, thank you for the part you play in helping make the care experience, and specifically family time, easier for everyone involved. If you see me around and have questions, feel free to ask. I hope I'm easy to spot. Thank you.